Welcome to today's Illinois Extension LGE webinar. We're hosting Matt Schmidt from the Illinois Office of Broadband to give us a session on round 2 of the Connect Illinois grant program. Many of you on the call today who are attending know Matt already. He's been rolling out this nationally competitive grant program with the state of Illinois from the beginning of its rollout until now. And we're grateful to have him on to give us information regarding these important programs and to discuss with you in real time for questions and pointers for these application processes. Matt, thank you for returning. And before I hand it over to you, I'll just remind participants that we encourage you to utilize the chat space to ask questions at any time during Matt's presentation. And also after today's presentation, I will be sending a follow-up email with slides and the recording. And I just want to say thank you, Matt, and everyone here for their time, and we'll get started.
All right, thank you so much, Nancy. It's great to join you again, and thank you and University of Illinois Extension for helping us host these webinars. We think it's really important to try to bring to life our grant programming, especially our historic nation-leading Connect Illinois grant program with $400 million available for achieving ubiquitous connectivity around the state of Illinois. And so for folks who are joining us, I know that this is going to be posted and online after the fact, and so you certainly will have the opportunity to go and revisit this after the fact. But I just wanted to mention, I guess, a familiar note that I like to raise. What I say during this webinar is meant to, again, bring to life our Connect Illinois grant program. I do not want to have any statements today that cause confusion or contradict anything that's in our notice of funding opportunity or our frequently asked questions or other related materials. And so if there is any conflict, always resort back to what's in print, what's included in that NOFO and the supporting materials. That being said, I'm going to do my best not to create any confusion today, but rather to bring to life this opportunity, address any questions you might have, and again, urge on participation in this program, because at the end of the day, this is only going to be a success if we've got robust participation from every corner of the state. We saw that in round 1, we're expecting it in round 2, and we're really eager to move forward. And so with that said, we'll be keeping an eye on the chat box. Please feel free to raise any questions. And if you have any questions that you'd like to see addressed in our frequently asked questions document, we'll be updating that one final time following today's webinar. And so with that said, I'll launch into this. There is some familiar content here because we don't want to presume that everybody has seen every webinar we've put out, but rather we want to be able to bring to life this program for those who are just joining us for the first time. There are some previous webinars available through University Extension. And so you're welcome to go to our website, Connect Illinois, and they're hosted there as well. But today I'd just like to touch upon a few pieces that will be really embedded in the slides that are before us. One, brief discussion of our application pre-qualifications, the sorts of things that you should be doing as an applicant to get ready so that when you submit your application, you have all the appropriate boxes checked, and it should be relative clear sailing from that point forward. We just want to make sure if you're putting in the time on the front end to be an applicant for Connect Illinois, that you're eligible, that you've met those application pre-qualification standards. Secondly, there are a number of grant requirements that go along with being a grantee with the state of Illinois that goes beyond simply the Office of Broadband and the Connect Illinois program. We just want to be clear about what those requirements are. In many cases, there are waiver processes, or there's opportunities for, I think, having a conversation about how to meet goals. But that being said, we want all of our applicants to be aware of the requirements that are out there as you're applying. We want to spend a little bit of time talking about the round 2 timeline and how we expect the weeks and months ahead to progress. And then we'll talk a little bit about an office hour opportunity that we're incorporating into round 2 of Connect Illinois. Given how much time goes into putting an application together, we want to make ourselves available. We do that with the webinars, but also if an applicant would like to connect with us on a one-on-one basis, we do have some windows every week available for doing that. And so we do encourage applicants that would like to run through our grant program or get a better understanding of how to make their proposal as competitive as possible. We'll be happy to connect with you on a one-to-one basis. Then we'll share some familiar slides here regarding our notice of funding opportunity. Again, this is a document that we spend a lot of time putting together. We want to make sure that you're familiar with it. And so we'll reference that throughout the slides here ahead. And then also we've got some related material that is integral to making a successful application. That's parts 1 and parts 2 of our application packet, as well as the project budget. And so with that said, we'll launch right in here. But again, feel free to raise your questions as they come to mind. And Nancy, of course, as always, don't hesitate to interject with any questions if they're arising throughout the course of our talk together here. And so, as we tend to do, we start with reference to our Connect Illinois webpage. Much of the information that we have regarding our grant programming and related resources is available on our Connect Illinois website. And so whether it's a map for eligible areas, a description of our strategic plan, opportunity to enlist in our newsletter and sign up for that. Also, all the material related to the Connect Illinois grant program itself housed on our Connect Illinois website. And so all the material that follows you can find through that website. If you scroll down this menu on the right-hand side, will take you down to our broadband grants. And so we've got more material here than we had last year as our program evolves and matures. But what we'll be talking about here for round 2 is the round 2 NOFO that you can see as you scroll down this right-hand vertical menu. The application packets 1 and 2 will make reference to this Fed-Celerator framework, the ways in which we envision state Connect Illinois grant funding partnering with federal funding opportunity. And then you'll also have below that a link to, well, the webinar series that we've been partnering on, Nancy, for, well, a year and a half now, it seems. And then finally, the FAQ document. And so again, wealth of resources here on this Connect Illinois website. So if you click on the NOFO, the round 2 NOFO, it'll take you to this page. You scroll down on this page and you'll see the key information that you need to be an applicant for round 2. The DCEO mandatory disclosure, the NOFO supplement, the Connect Illinois round 2 application packet, the uniform application, the budget template, and then finally the DCEO, Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, conflict of interest disclosure. Seems like a lot, but much of this is fairly straightforward and quite doable. But an application does take a lot of work, and so we want to make sure that if you haven't started yet, that you're looking at our map of eligible funding areas, reconciling that with your ideas and where you'd like to make investments in Illinois or partner with providers to make investments in Illinois, and you're starting to put some of those ideas together. And certainly it's not too late to get started, but we really encourage folks to take a look at this. If you're interested in round 2, you haven't dug into these materials, please use this as inspiration to start. And so if you click on the NOFO link on that prior page, the supplemental NOFO, I think, is what it's referring to. It'll take you to this, and this is actually what we consider our notice of funding opportunity. The pages that follow come straight out of that NOFO. And for round 2 here, as you can see, we have $50 million available, maximum grant award up to $5 million, consistent with what we saw in round 1. We have extended our application deadline to April 12th. We were hearing from a number of interested applicants that just could use some more time. And looking at our scheduling and what we're able to do, we feel like we can push back the deadline, hustle a little bit more internally to score our applications that come to us, and announce the awards for round 2 on basically the same timeline that we were expecting to in what we did last year. And so that's the hope. So you got an additional 6 weeks or so. And so we hope you make the most of it as an applicant up to Monday, April 12th to hear from you. And so in order to be an eligible applicant, we just want to stress, make sure that you are GATA pre-qualified. And GATA is the Grants Accountability and Transparency Act. It's federal statute and law that we essentially adopt here in Illinois and defer to. And so you have to be GATA pre-qualified. There's not a lot of wiggle room if you're not. And so in fact, there's none. And so as a potential applicant, make sure you're looking at how to be GATA pre-qualified. If you have any questions about your current status, don't hesitate to shoot us an email at broadband@illinois.gov. That's the best way to be in touch with us on any number of questions, broadband@ illinois.gov. Shoot us an email, and we'd be happy to confirm your GATA status and answer any other questions you may have, including scheduling an office hour if you'd like to have some of that one-on-one time to go through your application and our grant program. And again, we just really emphasize that folks read the NOFO carefully and be responsive to what we're looking for. We really want to make sure that applicants that put the time in to be an applicant, want to be a grantee through Connect Illinois, have a firm understanding of requirements, of the pre-qualifications needed, and so that your hard work will be fruitful and lead to a partnership with the state of Illinois for grant funding. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to accomplish in our stated goal of broadband ubiquity across the state of Illinois, homes, businesses, community anchor institutions, access to at least basic broadband by 2024. And so we're really high on the combination of the Connect Illinois grant program and also some new and improved federal funding opportunities that complement that. So diving into this, we have a checklist included in the notice of funding opportunities. We saw in round one, I think all the applications came to us by electronic PDF submitted to that same broadband@illinois.gov email account. You also can submit hard copies, but we know these applications tend to be pretty long. So either way works. We also have, for really large file sizes, there is reference in the NOFO to alternative electronic submission approaches. And so if you've got any questions, again, that email address and also our phone number here you can see for the Office of Broadband listed in this slide. And so just a quick program description. $400 million available here total for our Connect Illinois grant program. The second round of funding includes the $50 million. So a total of approximately $100 million will have been deployed through round one and round two. And one of the hallmarks of this grant program is that it's a competitive matching grant program. And so we do score all of the applications that we receive on a competitive basis, awarding grants to those projects that score the most competitively relative to our scoring metric. And also we are asking for non-state match of at least 50% for most projects, so that we're able to turn $1 of state Connect Illinois funding into at least $2 of overall broadband impact. And that's what we saw with round one funding. We certainly hope to see that with round two. And again, more information regarding the funding, up to $5 million per grant. We do expect the projects will be completed within a 3-year time horizon. So in this case, by June 30th of 2024. Obviously, with the pandemic, we are all eager to deploy these networks and improve connectivity as fast as we possibly can. And so from our standpoint, the Office of Broadband, we will continue to serve as a liaison and an advocate for our grantees to help meet state goals and requirements, and also help you deploy your networks and get to work. And so you can count on us as a partner in helping to move forward, not only with an application, but in moving forward with your grant. And so we hope for round two that we don't have any of our grants extending to June 30th of 2024, but rather many of them have closed and completed work well in advance of that. But our grantees will have, again, up to 3 years to do this work. All right, and just want to acknowledge that we do not, the release of this notice of funding opportunity does not obligate the department to make an award, but as was the case with round one, we saw a lot of great applicants. We were in applications. We were very pleased with both the quality and the quantity of applications in round one, and we certainly hope that continues in round two. So a word again about eligibility. We talked a little bit about the importance of making sure as an applicant that you are GATA pre-qualified. So I'm going to repeat that. Shoot us a line at broadband@illinois.gov if you have any questions about your current status. It's not too late to get pre-qualified, but this is not something you want to wait for the last week of the application window to address. In addition to that, we want to make sure that you have a valid FEEN number, you have a valid DUNS number, you have a current sam.gov account, that you're not included on the federal excluded parties list. So basically, you've been a good actor in receiving other public dollars and completing projects accordingly, that you're in good standing with the Illinois Secretary of State, and that you're not on the Illinois Stop Payment list. So again, in keeping up with, you're a good partner, you've used public dollars well in the past. And so we want to confirm those pieces ahead of time. The things that you need to do, though: get a pre-qualification, have a valid FEEN number, a valid DUN number, and also a current sam.gov account. those pieces. Make sure you're looking at that. If you have any questions, please let us know as soon as you can. We'd be happy to talk through that and confirm your status. And again, eligibility information, this is something that we're really proud of with Connect Illinois. We want to make it an open, inclusive process. And so with round one, many of our grantees turned out to be Illinois internet service providers. We did have a public entity in the form of Cook County. We welcome broadband providers as well as local units of government and communities, nonprofit organizations, cooperative associations, or other entities that are established to essentially expand broadband access in Illinois. And so again, this is an open, inclusive process for eligible applicants, certainly the case here with round two. Eligible project areas, I'm not showing you the map, but we do have a map posted to our Connect Illinois website regarding areas that are deemed served, unserved, or underserved in Illinois. And that map does start a conversation about what the level of service is in a given area and is not. And so as an applicant, you want to have a pretty good sense as to what the current broadband access is in the area that you're proposing to deploy broadband. With our program, we'd like to target resources to the hardest to serve areas, or those areas that fall beneath a basic threshold of 100 megabits per second download, 20 megabits per second upload, our definition of underserved in Illinois. But we also do have some additional funding categories here that we'll describe in future slides here that bring this program, I guess, to life for all corners of the state. And so we'll have some slides devoted to the remaining project categories. In addition to broadband access, we have broadband equity, broadband innovation, and our urban broadband categories. And so we have a definition here in our notice of funding opportunity of what is an unserved area, what is an underserved area. We won't necessarily repeat those here. Again, this information available on our Connect Illinois website. And a word about eligible program costs. These are bond-backed dollars, so there is a limitation on what the dollars can be used for. In short, this is a capital program focusing on infrastructure and related equipment that is durable in nature. And so when you think of the kinds of equipment that you would be investing in for broadband expansion, that equipment tends to qualify for funding. And certainly if you're extending fiber and digging up the road and conduit or interduct, those expenses are certainly covered, as well as labor and certain planning costs as well. And so you can see at the bottom, eligible project costs include project planning, network design, obtaining construction permits, and then of course the construction itself. And so if there are any questions regarding costs, we do have additional information both available on our website, and we can follow up with more specifics if needed. And then I think just a point here I'd just like to emphasize with cost sharing. Yes, we do expect there to be a non-state match of at least 50% for projects in round two. However, we did create a new category called the broadband equity category that recognizes that some parts of the state are really difficult to serve, more difficult than others. And they may be the most rural of the rural areas of Illinois, or they may be areas where you have historically low adoption rates due to historic or systemic poverty, for instance. In those areas where a strong case can be made for a state subsidy larger than 50%, we're willing to relax in part that 50% non-state requirement. And so this is going to be on a case-by-case basis, applicable only to the broadband equity category. And if you get into the materials, you'll have a pretty clear path as to how to designate your project accordingly. Again, future slides, we'll get into the details a little bit here in a moment. And again, because this is bond-backed, indirect costs are not covered, not eligible for expense. We've been asked that. That's included in our FAQ document. So just wanted to mention that. And now we wanted to pivot to a word about the program requirements. We talked a little bit about essentially the prerequisites, or the sorts of things that you need to be addressing before you're a grantee. But once you become a grantee, there are a number of requirements that go along with receiving state awards. And these requirements, they're referenced and spelled out in our notice of funding opportunity. We just don't want them to come as a surprise for any of our grantees. We do believe that all of these are achievable, and from our perspective, with the Office of Broadband, we are positioned to be a liaison to other state agencies or departments, help you get to yes, so to speak, in meeting these goals or requirements. And the first is our Business Enterprise Program. Goals are established for budget allocation and subcontracts to firms owned by minorities, females, or persons with disabilities. And so that's a piece that you're going to want to be knowledgeable about and take seriously. And so we'd be happy to provide more information if there are specific questions about that. But that BEP program does establish goals that we hope that our grantees will seek to meet in good faith. Also, there are certain environmental review requirements that are stipulated as an applicant becomes a grantee, and that's driven largely internally on our end through the Office of Broadband and through our partner agencies and state government. So it's not something that a grantee, or an applicant has to do on the front end, but just be aware of that. Environmental review may be triggered in certain circumstances. In addition, we have our Illinois Works Jobs program, and that's an apprenticeship program by and large that was created in 2019 as part of our rebuild effort here in Illinois. And so that is a requirement that is stipulated for projects and grants that total at least $500,000 or more. Again, we have more information regarding that requirement. We think it does a world of good in terms of developing the pipeline for young people working in the trades of telecommunications, and hence its inclusion herein. We have the Prevailing Wage Act that applies to programs, and I just want to emphasize this is the one that there really is not a lot of leeway with. And so I want to make clear for potential applicants, we did have an applicant in round one that was not aware that prevailing wage was going to apply. And I don't want anybody to be surprised by that here in round two. Prevailing wage does apply. We'd be happy to connect any applicants with the Department of Labor to help address any questions you may have, get a better understanding about what those prevailing wage rates would be in your area, because they do differ from one part of the state to the next. But nonetheless, we just want to make clear of all of the requirements that we're mentioning here today. We do have waiver processes or an opportunity for a relaxation of the goals or the requirement itself, but the prevailing wage is the one that there is very little wiggle room on. And so just know that. And then finally, because of the pandemic and we have relatively high unemployment rates, the Employment of Illinois Workers on Public Works Act, basically the Illinois Workers Act, was triggered. And so that means that grantees should employ at least 90% of Illinois laborers in their project. We understand that that might not be a realistic goal. And so the extent to which that's not attainable, we have a waiver process that our grantees can go through. And again, just want to recognize that these are requirements of the program, but that where those requirements cannot be met, we tend to have waiver processes. And so we want to be reasonable. And from our standpoint, the Office of Broadband is here to be your advocate, here to work with you to get to yes on any number of fronts. And so just wanted to make a quick mention of those requirements so that nobody is caught by surprise there. And again, if there are any specific questions that you'd like to address with us one-on-one, we have the office hours that we could talk about the requirements, the pre-application steps that you should take, and also any ideas that you have regarding your application itself. And so we have a few additional slides here regarding the application submittal process. And so again, we do encourage folks to submit to the broadband@illinois.gov email address, but we do have an office in Springfield that accepts hard copies. And in the meantime, if you're an applicant or a potential applicant that would like to have a hard copy of all the materials or certain materials that we're referencing today, feel free to contact us at the information that you see on your screen here, and we'd be happy to follow up with hard copy versions of the notice of funding opportunity or the application packet. And again, I've already mentioned how you can submit an application, so we won't go over that here. But we do want, as you can see in the second paragraph here, we do need to have electronic versions of the maps of the footprint that you're proposing to do a broadband expansion within. And so that is something that we'll need to acquire electronically. There's different ways to do that, just as easily, in most cases, can be part of your electronic submission via email. So that brings us to the content and the form of the application submission. We have some subsequent slides that will get into this in further detail, but we've tried to lay out in the NOFO here and also in the supplemental materials through the application packet what a successful application should look like. And so I'm not going to spend much more time here, but this is spelled out again in the NOFO itself and also the supplemental materials, the application packet. A little bit more word on the Dun and Bradstreet Universal Numbering System, the DUNS number that you need to have to be an applicant to our program. So that's referenced specifically in the NOFO. We also have additional information regarding, again, the deadline, ways to submit. We bend over backwards in the NOFO to make it clear how you submit. And so again, you have the CMS data sharing link here if your file is too large to send by email. All right, so that brings us to the merit review process. And so once you've taken the steps to be an eligible applicant in Illinois, and you've submitted your application, and then your application is in our hands, so essentially beginning April 12th, what we'll do is start a kind of a dual process where we do merit review on a competitive basis, scoring the eligible applications that we receive, and we'll also do a mapping review where we try to get a better handle on where broadband is and is not in Illinois so that we're targeting our resources smartly. And so those two processes essentially work in partnership with one another, the merit review and the mapping review. And so the NOFO speaks to these processes. We also provide additional detail once we pass the application deadline. We'll keep our website updated on where we are in the process, just so applicants have a good sense as to what is needed and where they're at. And so here's the reference to the mapping review process itself. And then the selection process, again, we've got a scoring rubric established for scoring on a competitive basis applications in each of the 4 categories that I spoke of earlier. One point that we like to emphasize is we do want to seek geographic balance throughout the state, so that can be a factor. And we were very happy with round 1. We had a project in every one of the 10 economic development regions in the state. And so, of course, broadband, when we talk about ubiquitous broadband, that means getting broadband everywhere. We want to make sure that we're targeting our resources in the state in a balanced way so that we're able to achieve that goal across the board. And so here's just another reference to the 4 categories that we have. This is straight out of our notice of funding opportunity. I've already mentioned the 4 categories: broadband access, broadband equity, broadband innovation, urban broadband. Both the NOFO and the supporting materials speak in great detail to these 4 categories. And so essentially what we're doing is we're asking our applicants to select which category you would like to be considered under. For round 1, I think all but one of the applications that we received that were eligible for scoring were under the broadband access category. We do have broadband equity, again, for those really, really hard to serve areas where we are willing to relax that 50% non-state match requirement. We have a broadband innovation category that's established for applications that not only would like to extend networks and connectivity to homes, businesses, or community anchor institutions, but also would like to highlight uses such as remote learning or telehealth or economic development or precision agriculture. And because different applications might emphasize different things, we want to give applicants a chance to kind of be compared on an apples to apples basis, and hence the 4 categories. And finally, that 4th category, urban broadband, those are for projects in areas of population 75,000 or more. And so essentially our MSAs are metropolitan areas in Illinois. All right, just a word about federal funding. Some states do not necessarily like to acknowledge or take in federal funding as a non-state match. In our case, we'd like to leverage our nation-leading Connect Illinois grant program to maximize or at least optimize the degree of federal funds that we're bringing into the state. And for that reason, we are willing to acknowledge federal funding as a non-state match source. And so we'll talk a little bit more later on about our FedCelerator program. The whole idea here is to accelerate the impact of federal investments in broadband in Illinois by pairing them with the Connect Illinois program. And so finally, the NOFO does reference an appeal process for those applicants that would like to appeal the decision of the merit-based review process. And so the NOFO references that. There's more information available via link. And so in terms of the process that we undertake here, April 12th, of course, is our application deadline. Then we begin our merit review process internally with a merit review team, going over the scoring criteria that I will get to in a moment here. We also have that complementary mapping review process. Once those processes wrap up and we've had an opportunity to get a full grasp of what's being proposed and which projects we deem most competitive and we'd like to fund, we will issue a notice of state award, essentially a NOSA, out to applicants. And so that's a piece that we, a formal step in this process. And so that's a good thing for applicants to receive, because that means that we want to partner with you. We want to make you a grantee of Connect Illinois Round 2. And so one piece I'd like to just emphasize here that we noticed from Round 1 is just in terms of how an applicant is identifying itself. And there's a couple of points here that we would just like to emphasize regarding, disregarded entities. And those are entities that might be covered by a parent organization. And so some of our applicants for Round 2 were larger broadband service providers. And so there's a couple of points. First of all, if you have a parent company, that must be the official applicant if a subsidiary doing the work is a disregarded entity. So these are legal terms. If you're a disregarded entity, the parent company must be the official applicant. So that's one point that we want to emphasize. Secondly, we want you to indicate in the application if the parent company is applying on behalf of a disregarded subsidiary. And so please, if this applies to you, please indicate that in your application and register accordingly. Third, the parent company or the regarded entity must be registered in GATA in order to be an official recipient of the grant funds. And then finally, you had to submit all the forms using the regarded entities FEEN and DUNS numbers. And so this is a point I meant to make earlier when we were talking about the pre-qualification steps. But just please keep that in mind. And this is something that we'll put into our FAQ document to make sure that it's spelled out in finer detail. But for larger companies that do have a regarded entity and a disregarded entity, please register as that parent or that regarded entity and be consistent throughout. And so just a point we wanted to emphasize here today. All right, and so moving on, there's a piece here regarding reporting, monitoring, and auditing. And so with the award of a grant, a grantee can have up to 25% of the funds immediately upon execution of a grant agreement. And then essentially they can be reimbursed periodically throughout the duration of the project. And if a grantee would like to accelerate their deployment, they're incurring costs, they'd like to be reimbursed on a relatively aggressive time frame, we will do everything that we can to reimburse you in a manner that will speed up your deployment rather than slow it down. And so with that award of funding comes the expectation for reporting. And so that's going to be a key provision in the grant agreement that is executed between the state of Illinois and our grantees. And so with that will come monitoring and the potential for auditing down the road. One thing that we likely will be introducing here later in 2021 is field testing that will just kind of confirm the speeds that are being proposed, are being delivered, not only for our Connect Illinois projects, but also as a way of making sure that we're getting the best, most accurate mapping that we possibly can. So just wanted to mention that these pieces are also included in our NOFO. All right, so now this brings us back to the familiar Connect Illinois webpage. And again, we've got this vertical menu here on the right. A lot of what we're talking about here today falls under the broadband grants header. But again, there's a mention of various resources here that we think do add value to what we're doing here in the Office of Broadband and for you as an applicant for Connect Illinois. So you scroll down. We've talked a lot about information that's included in the Round 2 NOFO tab here under the broadband grants header. We're going to pivot forward here and talk a little bit about the application packet. And that application packet was designed to provide more detail that was not included in the notice of funding opportunity itself. And then in the case of the application packet too, the second half of it, we actually provide a template for for applicants that would love to become grantees to use to fill out your application. So we're trying to put the pieces in place so you're not having to reinvent the wheel or that it's very clear to you what you need to be doing. And so here's just a reference to the part 1 of the application packet. Part 1 focuses on the selection criteria and the scoring categories. And so this is taken straight from that Part 1 application packet document. So if you open that up, we link to it on our Connect Illinois website. This is what you'll see. Again, a more description of those 4 categories that we've already spoken of today. We do have treatment of the selection criteria and scoring criteria as well. And so if you advance, you can see 7 broad areas: project impact, non-state match, and demonstration of need as a second kind of category or selection criteria. The degree of community support, project readiness, project viability and sustainability, affordability and adoption assistance, and then finally, the degree to which an application is proposing work that's open access, shared use, and how you talk about your business strategy. And so we could talk a lot about each one of these. I just wanted to make reference to the fact that Part 1 of the application does provide quite a bit of detail regarding the scoring criteria and the sorts of things that we value, we take into account as we're scoring the applications themselves. And then moving into the FedCelerator framework, we referenced that earlier. That's our approach to putting our grantees in a position to leverage federal dollars, or if there are federal grantees that would like to leverage Connect Illinois dollars, we're trying to essentially kind of establish a framework, guidelines for how we'd like to work together. And I think one piece here that we reference is, you can kind of think of it, we talk a lot about a 3-legged stool. I think, perhaps an ideal approach is you have a third funding coming from the state, a third funding coming from the federal government, and a third of the funding coming from the provider or the local community. It doesn't have to be a hard and fast 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, but I think that's something to strive for as we're trying to leverage federal funding to the fullest, and also acknowledge in hard to serve areas that some state funding might help accelerate the deployment of the broadband network or expand the footprint. And so a couple of pieces that we want to emphasize. First of all, we do want an accelerated timeline and deployment schedule. We do want a larger footprint than a federal award might indicate to be eligible for a FedCelerator kind of pairing of state and federal funds. We do expect that all deployments will be scalable to at least 100 megabit per second symmetrical service. And so that's a requirement of the Connect Illinois grant program. Also, the requirements that we spoke of earlier would apply to these sorts of FedCelerator projects. And then finally, we do expect that the project in full will be completed within 3 years. And so that has been one criticism that we see with some federally funded projects, is that you have well over 3 years to complete them. And certainly in the pandemic, we want to do everything that we can at the Office of Broadband to try to accelerate broadband deployment, and whether it's funded through the state or in partnership with state and federal resources. And so don't want to spend too much time here talking about the FedCelerator framework, but we think it's an opportunity, again, for getting the most out of federal funding opportunities and in stretching our Connect Illinois dollars to the fullest. And so there is additional information provided, again, under the FedCelerator framework tab on our Connect Illinois website. And so that brings us back. You can see as you scroll down, we're in the broadband grants category, the NOFO application packet 1 we've talked about, the FedCelerator framework we're just talking about, and now we'll pivot forward to Part 2 of that application packet. And Part 2 is really designed to be a template for applicants to use this as a fillable PDF to submit your application. Makes it easier for us as a merit review team. We're seeing all applications and information provided in a consistent manner. We hope it makes it easy for you as an applicant to know where to provide necessary information and do it in a consistent manner. And so we have that Part 2 of the application packet, the broadband application itself. And again, there's a lot of information in each one of these parts, Part 1 and Part 2 of the application packet, but Part 2 emphasizes what a complete application looks like. We talk about the broadband application itself. So that's getting at the heart of what you're proposing, bringing to life your vision for the broadband deployment you'd like to leverage Connect Illinois resources for. So we ask for a cover page that describes in 1 page or less, what you're trying to accomplish. We have a project dashboard that will provide us with kind of key metrics for your project. We have an executive summary that, again, synthesizes the crux of your proposal. And then we get into map and location data, project impact. Again, we're running through the scoring criteria mentioned earlier: non-state match, demonstration of financial need, community support, project readiness, viability and sustainability, affordability and adoption assistance, and then finally open access, shared use, and business strategy. And we also invite appendices to be attached at the end of that broadband application portion of the overall Connect Illinois application. And in addition to those parts, and again, we put them out there not to intimidate or to dissuade, but rather to say, hey, this is how you line up your application. We also have some requirements from the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity referenced in the NOFO: that uniform grant application, the uniform capital budget, the conflict of interest disclosure, the mandatory disclosures, as well as a W-9 form. And so A, B, C, D, E, and F, those component parts are a complete application responsive both to the Office of Broadband regarding the broadband specific information we're seeking, and also responsive to Department of Commerce Economic Opportunity regarding various disclosures, W-9, and your budget, of course. So this information referenced quickly here in this slide, but application packet parts 1 and part 2 speak to this in much more detail. And so finally, we have a slide here in front of us, and we're getting to the end of the slides I have for you. So looking forward to Q&A here if there are any. This is a quick slide taken from that uniform budget template. And I think a couple of pieces here that are just worth highlighting. What we're looking for applicants to do essentially is break out on a one-to-one basis the overall project budget that's going to be using state dollars, and the overall project budget that's going to be using the non-state match. And essentially what we encourage folks to do is apply that consistently, throughout your budget. And so fill out both parts of each page of the budget accordingly. And then also there is a narrative box at the bottom of each one of the tabs within the budget. Make sure you spend just a little bit of time filling out the narrative so that so you can, again, for your part, bring to life what you're proposing in the cells of the template here itself. And so this is, multiple pages here, but the point is what we want to do is consistently ask for information regarding your budget, your approach, so that as we're looking and comparing one application to the next, we're able to make kind of an apples to apples comparison. And so with that, I've run through a lot of material that is posted on our Connect Illinois website that we have put a lot of time and effort into trying to make the application process as clear and as straightforward to applicants as possible. That being said, we recognize there's a lot going on here. If there are any questions, be happy to take any of them right now. And certainly just a reminder, we do have that office hour opportunity looking at afternoons throughout the weekdays for the next several weeks as we approach our application deadline of April 12th. And so whether you have a question here today on the phone or on the webinar, if you'd like to follow us up with us at broadband@illinois.gov, we'd be happy to address any of your questions. And so with that, let's check out the chat box and see what we have.
Yeah. So we had a question that at the beginning, I thought maybe it was just to see if they would get a copy of the slides, but actually it's a question more in regards to some of the information that you covered in the first few slides about what would be online. I believe there was a bullet list. And so the participant was asking if all of that information is definitely found on the website.
Yeah, and I can certainly toggle back and forth with slides here, but I'll just confirm everything that I've shared in this slide deck here today is taken straight from the materials that are posted online. And so if you go to that Connect Illinois website, you'll see that round 2 NOFO link. You click on that, you scroll down, and everything will be laid out there in terms of the disclosure forms, the NOFO document itself, also the budget. And we have the application packet, essentially a more detailed articulation of the scoring criteria, as well as the actual application template itself. So all of that material, including these slides, will be available on that Connect Illinois website. And if folks have any questions, I would just say, don't hesitate to shoot a line to broadband@illinois.gov. We can send you the links to any aspect of this directly.
Thank you. I'm going to write that in the chat box as well so people have that email. And then, so starting with the questions we had that were posted all throughout the presentation, the first one was on pre-qualifying, GATA pre-qualification, and wanting to know that if for the round one, if they GATA pre-qualified, is that sufficient? And I think maybe, whether it be fortunately or unfortunately, there are probably a lot of places around the state that might have this question.
Yeah, so I would just say, like, let's not make any assumptions here. And so chances are, if you were GATA pre-qualified for round one, you're still going to be GATA pre-qualified for round two. But if you have any questions, please just email us broadband@illinois.gov, and we can look it up and confirm and get back to you, hopefully within the day, just to make sure you've got that box checked.
Yeah, so I put that email in the chat box, and let's see what the next question was. In section 11B, could you explain more about the 5-year commitment? Our package rates are usually not guaranteed and subject to change as the cost of business here changes.
Yeah, so what we reference in the application packet is a commitment to price stability. And so what I would say is this: don't use that reference as a reason to not apply to be an applicant and a grantee with Connect Illinois. But if that's a real issue for you, please discuss it in your narrative. And we just appreciate that honesty. If we have any questions as we're reviewing your application and we want to reach out for some clarity, we'll do that. And so I think the key here is, and this has been revealed in the pandemic, that affordability is a key barrier for a lot of community members across the state, and folks who need broadband. And so we want to do what we can to invest in projects that will be able to ensure price stability. And so we have referenced that in our application packet. If that's a commitment that you're not able to make, or if you think that there's a real issue there, please speak to that in your narrative. And again, we will take that into account. And if that's a piece that you can't meet, you may be dinged a couple of points, or it may hurt you on a competitive basis relative to other applicants. But we'd much rather have that conversation with you as an applicant and a future grantee than have you wait out this round. And so hopefully that's clear. And I know that I can go on and on here, Nancy, so I'll leave it at that. If there's more question regarding that kind of issue, just let us know. Otherwise, we'll include that question in our FAQ document too.
Okay, so the next question is, what will the challenge window be? And has that been determined yet? And that was sort of early on in the presentation as well.
Yeah, and so what we did with round one is we did our best to communicate this broadly with applicants and incumbents and other stakeholders. But on our website, we will have a page that will basically be providing updates on where we are in the process. And so the application window will close April 12th, and then shortly thereafter we will begin our merit review process. And what we did with round one is we took the maps that were included in the applications, and we shared those online in a very transparent way. And frankly, I don't know how many other offices do this around the country, but we think that this is important. And so we share that information. We invite feedback from the broader community and incumbent providers to let us know what their plans are in the area, what they're up to, what their knowledge of prevailing broadband service is, just so that we have a better idea of what the broadband service landscape is. And so that process, we don't have those dates established right now, but that's something that we will articulate online once the application deadline has passed, and we'll bend over backwards to make sure that folks know where we are in that process and communicate accordingly.
Very good. Thank you. Can you please outline the public comment process for round two grant applications?
So for applications themselves, I think this is a similar question. And essentially what we'll do is we will post a map of the proposed service areas or footprints for round two projects. And we will have each map, the map, you can click on a specific project, you'll get a little description of what's being proposed for that area. And you will have an opportunity essentially email us and let us know, hey, we have some information on this. We'd like to provide that information to you. For round one, we had some conversations with stakeholders. We received email input, and so that's the kind of conversation that we hope to start. On one track with applicants through the application process, and on another track with incumbents and other stakeholders accordingly. And so that's going to be articulated online as we did with round one. And again, we really invite conversation and dialogue. And so broadband at illinois.gov is the best place to kind of register a question, and then we can start that dialogue. But again, everything is flowing right through our Connect Illinois website. And in fact, that header of broadband grants, it'll all be right there.
Well, thank you. That was very clear the second time around with the process and how this sort of works out, and that they can use the email for feedback as well. So there was a question about, you had mentioned about the breakdown for Illinois employment, the 90% threshold, but
Yep.
This question came in around there. Do equipment costs include long-term distance learning technology upgrades, potentially at a community college, business incubator, or career institute place?
So here's where we draw the line with that. We really want to see applications include like examples of use and innovation. So whether it's telehealth or distance learning, precision ag, certain applications with work from home or so forth. But these are bond-backed dollars, and so we have to apply some, I guess, stipulations to how those dollars are used. And so we can use these dollars for broadband infrastructure and durable equipment tied to telecommunications. And so what we've encouraged applicants to do, they're going to include that broadband infrastructure, broadband equipment, telecommunications equipment, in addition to some equipment for remote learning or telehealth, is to specifically include that use budget information for telehealth or remote learning, but don't include it in the 50% state grant amount that you're seeking. Include it in your non-state match. And that helps us in two ways: get a firm understanding of your plans and what how you plan to use the broadband that you're going to have as a result of the grant and the deployment, but also it'll count towards a non-state match in addition to 50% in most cases, which you will be rewarded with points for. And we didn't get into it on the webinar here today, but the application packet kind of spells out how those points are awarded. And if you provide 55% or more of total project costs in non-state match, you start accruing some bonus points, so to speak. And so we think that that's a great way to bring in these ideas, this budget, into your application, and essentially reward you accordingly. And so hopefully that makes sense.
And there's a question about the body of narratives. Maybe we refer in the body of narratives and answers on the application as the DBA entity name. And I don't know what DBA means actually.
So doing business as. And
so doing business as, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, sorry, Nancy. You certainly, please do that. But I think the point that I made, earlier regarding disregarded entities. So if you have a parent organization, a larger company, just make sure that you're registered under the parent company name, and that you're consistent, through the GATA process and the DUNS process, the SAMS at gov. The SAMS account. It's really important that there's that consistency. And so if you have any questions, I guess I sound like a broken record, broadband at illinois.gov is a great way to kind of get these specific questions answered. But I think with a larger company, we defer to that parent company, that regarded entity, and be consistent throughout. And so that would be our advice. And hopefully that's clear for folks. You certainly can include the DBA reference, but we want you to be registered consistently with these various portals. And sorry, I don't mean to beat that like a drum, but we had an issue that snagged up one of our grantees in round one. And so we really don't want to see that happen again in round two.